Good morning and welcome back to Flawed Dogs. In my bathrobe again. You got to remember that it's actually the night before you're watching this, so give me some slack, Jack. So we last left them. They had stolen all of Miss Nutbush's clothes, and I'm curious to see why on earth they would have done that. So, anyways, chapter 29, D-Day, Dog Day. Throngs of people, reporters, TV trucks, and police milled about outside of the Madison Square Garden arena, deep in the concrete recesses of Manhattan. The secretary of the Westminster Kennel Club stood stiffly at the rear entrance, holding a clipboard and staring in horror at a woman in fur walking toward him. Walking actually isn't a technically accurate term in this case, nor woman. If he could have seen below the Peruvian blue wool hat, the leopard fur coat, scarf, glasses, gloves, and baby seal boots, he would have seen most of the nervous renegades from the National Last-Ditch Dog Depository clinging to each other like rats on a piece of floating cork. All were piled atop Fabio, whose spindly legs drove the teetering assembly toward the terrified man. Bug's face poked up from the fur collar, but was largely gratefully hidden behind the scarf, hat, and glasses. Tied to the woman's empty glove and sleeve was a leash leading down to Sam, trotting nervously in front of her. But this wasn't the old Sam. Madam had done her makeover magic. Gone were the evidence of the last 3 terrible years. The scars and nicks and rips were covered up with the help of bits of glue, fur, and the other assorted wonders found in Mrs. Nutbush's makeup kit. Sam's reddish-brown coat shone and glistened from the aerosol canola oil found in the trash behind a Waffle House. And most astounding of all, Sam had 4 legs again. The steel soup ladle was gone, replaced by a leg made of leather plastic foam, fur, and the leg bone from a discarded bag of Kentucky Fried Chicken. Sam was again the stunning show dog from his former life. And here's a picture of him. That is what they did with Mrs. Nutbush's clothes. He had to be. He was the key to getting into this fortress of dog fabulousness. "I wish you luck, lad," said a familiar Scottish voice. Sam turned to see Peaches in the shadows behind a stall selling Westminster t-shirts. "I'd wish you luck if what you was doing was what a dog should be doing, but it's not, so I won't." Sam pulled his stumbling human toward Peaches. I'm setting things right," said Sam. Peaches sighed. "Sam, the lion, they called you before, but you're not. You're a dog. A dog's got twice the heart of a worthless, smelling, snoring lion. Your heart, Sammy. Set that thing right." Peaches turned and walked farther into the shadows. Sam was gonna call after him, but it was almost noon. Showtime. Sam held his head high and led the pile of dogs disguised as Mrs. Corinthian Nutbush toward the club secretary at a table covered in white linen, atop which were the badges and numbers that the registered competitors would wear. They stood before the table, the crowd suddenly growing silent around them. Below the coat, the dogs froze, trying not to breathe, burp, whine, itch, and ear, or break wind. Which didn't stop Poof from losing his grip on Old Blue's chest and sliding earthward. As the small curly-haired dog tried to regain traction, he slid around toward the rear, giving the full appearance to the observing crowd that below the coat, Mrs. Nutbush's left bosom had gone rogue and had begun a migration to her better shores. The club secretary watched this without expression beyond a single, perfectly arched eyebrow. "Madam," he said, "your bits are restless." Sam stood up on his rear legs, placed his front paws on the table, and offered the Westminster official an ID card, gripped in his teeth. In this case, one from the Vermont Dachshund Club. The man looked at it. "Mrs. Corinthian Nutbush," he read out loud. "Yes," responded another voice from behind the dogs. Sam, to his horror, turned to see the real Mrs. Nutbush standing several people back in the line. She stomped forward, giving the impression of an irritated refrigerator. "I'm Mrs. Corinthian Nutbush. What's the problem?" The real Mrs. Nutbush suddenly recognized her clothes standing next to her. She yelped, My coat, my blue wool hat. These are my clothes. I was robbed yesterday. This thief is an imposter. She's got my boots on backward." The official turned to the disguised dogs. "I am terribly sorry to bother you, dear lady, but is there any truth to this person's claims?" Sam froze. The dogs under the clothes began shaking. Sam worried that Poof would spontaneously erupt with a nervous blast, and they would explode like a fireworks display. "Madam, are you ill?" the official asked the fake Nutbush. "Can you take your glasses off, please?" The suspicious man began to reach for the huge sunglasses sitting atop Bug's snout. Behind them, the mutt's huge eyeballs were actually growing even larger and threatening to pop out entirely. The man glanced down and suddenly froze. "The Douglas tuft," he whispered. The official reached a shaking hand down and touched the wisp of hair curling up from where Madam had glued it atop Sam's perfect dachshund head. The official cupped his mouth with a hand and grew pale. He seemed to wilt at the sight of dog greatness, as a church deacon might before the robe of Jesus. That's my Douglas tuft," screamed Mrs. Nutbush. "Yours?" "Yes, that's mine." The man sighed with disbelief. "Yes, I'm sure, and so is the Taj Mahal." He snapped his fingers towards some burly men. "Security," he said. The men took Mrs. Nutbush by her arms and began dragging her toward the street. She continued to scream, "My Douglets!" even as she was loaded into the back of a police cruiser and driven away for what Sam desperately hoped was the final time. It occurred to Sam that this could only be guaranteed if she were to be shot into space. "Madam," said the man, turning back to the artificial Mrs. Nutbush and slipping a number 46 around her sleeve. "Welcome to the Westminster Dog Show, and may I personally offer you my best wishes for your success." He bowed. Fabio, at the bottom of the dog pile and ever the proper one, reflexively did the same. Bug, atop his shoulders, did not. The hushed crowd watched the northern half of the fake Mrs. Nutbush move in the opposite direction as the southern half, as she staggered into the great arena, her various bits again restless and on the move below the leopard coat. In this fashion did Sam lead his pirate commandos into the greatest dog show on earth in order to destroy it. Turning back to face the arena hall ahead, Sam immediately smelled Cassius. Chapter 30. Go. Sam hurriedly led the swaying pile of dogs around the arena's perimeter passage to an isolated latched side exit. Pushing on the door opened it to the alley behind, where the enormous Tusk waited. The huge dog ambled in. Madam jumped on her back. "There!" Sam pointed to a spiral staircase that disappeared up to the arena's roof far above. "Remember to wait for my signal." "Forever handsome," cooed Madam. Tusk galloped up the stairs toward the roof, Madam hanging onto his back with a cat's nimble balance. Sam then led his team to the arena's main backstage area. It looked like the pits of the Indianapolis 500, the dozens of racers surrounded by their crews prepping them for the big event. But instead of engines being turned, it was fur being poofed, nails polished and painted, teeth whitened, noses wiped, eyelashes curled, tails trimmed, breaths sweetened, and bottoms perfumed. The mutts below the fur coat peeked out, eyes wide and disbelieving. They simply had no idea that such creatures existed outside of legend. "Look," said Old Blue, her voice hushed in awe. Never had these unwanted mutts imagined that any dogs could receive so much slavish, smothering, all-consuming devotion from any human being. This they mistook for love, and it only focused them on the task at hand. A blast of trumpets startled them. It was the signal for the grand procession of champions. The backstage exploded into a sudden flurry of action, and the dogs and their owners lined up to enter the main arena. The commandos found a hidden corner behind a support pillar and tumbled forth from the clothing. They moved to a curtain, and each poked out an unwiped nose to behold the extraordinary sight unfolding inside the cavernous Colosseum. Amidst flashing camera bulbs, men and women led the show dogs in a procession around the arena, circling a central area covered by a vast red carpet. The 100,000 people in the seats cheered and waved and thundered their approval or disapproval of the canine gladiators strutting before them as they prepared for their battle of beauty. Occasionally, one human would break from the procession and run to the arena's edge and raise his dog above his head before the mob and send them into spasms of hysteria, bewitched as they were by the animal's groomed glory. On and on the parade of dogs and people went, strutting and prancing and basking in the crowd's passionate roars. Sam scanned the dogs, desperately looking for the huge poodle whose scent even now filled his nostrils, just as its memory filled his thoughts and dreams. he would find Cassius, and he would kill him, or die trying. The dogs and their owners returned backstage while another blast of trumpets announced the next vital stage in the day's events: lunch. As if called by trainers, the humans streamed out of the backstage area and departed for the miniature sandwiches squares at the Grand Breeders' Lunch in the terrace, leaving their spoiled champions in their little curtain stalls to do what they did best: sleep. Sam whispered to his commandos, "Get going." His squad of saboteurs scampered off in all directions and got busy. With paint, hair gel, superglue, hair dye, breakfast cereal, and, in Willie and Bug's case, hair clippers. A fluffy-furred, puffy white prize Bichon from Paris snoozed on his grooming table, but awoke to a familiar noise. He sleepily looked up to see what he believed to be an enormous hairy potato beetle hanging from the light post above him, with another tiny dog the size of a rodent wrapped in his tongue and dangling just over his body. The rodent dog was holding electric dog clippers and was nearly finished shaving the Bichon's body smooth, except for the buttocks. The Bichon laid his head back down, comforted in knowledge that he was either dreaming or he was dead and being set upon by demons. Either way, worrying about it was more stress than he was used to, and he returned to sleep. Sam watched with limited interest as his commandos worked, for this wasn't why he was really here, of course. So there's the, if you look carefully, the tongue and the Bichon, there's the Bichon, and then the dog hanging down, and look at his tongue, and there's the little guy with the clippers. So he crept quietly down the sides of stalls, inspecting the sleeping dogs, looking, sniffing. "Where are you, Cassius, old boy?" whispered Sam, his heart racing. His nose led him to the final stall, its curtains completely closed, hiding the dog within. He stood poised, unmoving, like a bird dog pointed at its prey. Suddenly, he caught another familiar scent. He knew this one, too. Mrs. Beaglehole. Sam smelled her dreadful perfume made from the feet of Turkish peahens. Suddenly, the curtains flew open, and she appeared, chewing a chicken leg. Sam froze and stared up at her, staring down at him only feet away. The huge woman cocked her head and stopped chewing. "That beautiful dachshund looks familiar." They locked eyes. Sam didn't breathe. "Couldn't be," she said out loud to herself. "You're dead." She never actually got a chance to say the word dead, for when she inhaled her mighty lungs to do so, she sucked the chicken leg into her gaping throat. Grasping at her neck, the choking woman stumbled backward and fell onto the dog bathtub, splintering it into shards of fiberglass while wrenching an ankle made weak from years of supporting more bulk than it was designed for. She belched out a shriek of pain which shot the chicken leg forth from her mouth like a bazooka, hitting a Persian Pekingese in the pooper in the next stall, saving her life but forever traumatizing his. She thought it best to run, which he did. Sam thought it best to run, which he did, but not before glimpsing the unmistakable puffs of Cassius's white, kinky fur as he lay slumbering on a table inside. Cassius, they're so close. Sam's mind raced. At that moment, a TV news helicopter circled over the Madison Square Garden arena, reporting on the dog show. "Look at that," said the reporter, staring down at the building's roof during a break. "Look at what?" said the pilot. "There's a skinny little mutt on the roof looking through the skylight." "It's a dog show. He's sneaking a peek," the pilot laughed. "There's another mutt dragging buckets of dirt from the palm trees up to the water tank and dumping them in." "Dumping dirt into the water tank?" said the pilot. "He's making mud," said the reporter. "Wait. Hold it." He looked again. "It's a rhinoceros." Okay. I'm going to stop there because the next chapter is kind of long. So, wonder what they're doing, making mud in the water tank for. Guess we'll find out tomorrow. Have a good day.